This is Culture Vulture with Peter Bent. And what have you got for us today, Peter?
Well, as I said, something the UK, in my opinion at least, is doing right. There are actually people who are opposing this. They're mostly working in advertising and fast food. But aside from that, I think the general consensus has been Boris Johnson, pat on the back. And it's actually because of his situation. Do you remember last year in Corona, he got gravely ill. He got taken to intensive care with COVID, right?
Right.
He was one of the leaders. Trump also got it, but I don't think he was quite as grave as Boris Johnson.
No.
He was in intensive care and all sorts. And when he came out, he said, I think I can accept it's because I'm so out of shape and overweight, bordering on obese, that I got such a bad response to the virus, right? Which I thought was nice of him to kind of front up about being honest about that, right? And since then, he's been on this mission to try and tackle Britain's obesity problem. We're not quite up there with the States, but in European terms, we are one of the fattest countries out there. I think I read a statistic. It's 2/3 of British adults are now overweight.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So the minority is a healthy weight, which is quite worrisome. And so the government have not yet confirmed completely, but it is almost certain that they are going to be banning junk food advertising online completely.
Whoa.
And then before 9 p.m. on TV from 2023.
Wow.
That's a big step, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're absolutely jumping in on censorship on products and areas. Once again, I mean, it's going to make some people happy, and others, certainly advertisers and corporations like that work in advertising, they're going to be certainly frustrated.
Yeah, especially the online aspect, because that's a blanket ban. At no time can you advertise the fast food. And it's not fast food only, it's any products that are high in fat, salt, and sugar. They call them, I think, HFSS products in the UK, right?
Oh.
But there are exceptions because things like honey, obviously very high in sugar, but they don't think are linked to childhood obesity so
Right.
much. Avocados are also in that category, so there had to be exceptions for that. Not that I've seen a lot of avocado advertising online or on TV. So there are exceptions, but it's expected to cost broadcasters alone about £200 million a year.
Wow.
Because it's a big segment of their advertising revenue. In the UK, it is a bit like the States. You see a lot of junk food being adverts, burgers, French fries, milkshakes and whatnot. The other exception is that brands will be able to advertise. So let's say the Golden Arches. You can advertise the brand, just just like a picture of the logo and the restaurant in general.
But not the food.
Yeah,
Like a soft sell.
Not any particular products.
Yeah, because they a lot of commercials do that kind of stuff these days. Like, let's say hypothetically, if they sponsor like LeBron James or something, then they might show like some basketball stuff of him doing cool things, and then at the very end of that, they might just show their logo to show like we were the ones that sponsored this commercial. But it was actually more about a person than it might be their products. So that actually is okay.
Yeah, that's still going to be okay. And also their own social media pages online, they can advertise whatever they like there. One other interesting thing I learned is that the nuggets, that were in the BTS meal, they're one of the few products from that restaurant that aren't considered high in fat, sugar, or salt.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not saying they're healthy. Let's not rush to eat them. But they're not classified under there. So maybe they could get away with still advertising the BTS meal, minus the French fries.
That's so funny. That will be the only menu that they're going to put up on the advertisements anymore.
Yeah, that as well as sugar-free, like the zero kind of versions of drinks, because they don't have sugar in them. They must have all sorts of chemicals, but they're also exempt from
That's
that
not
ban.
unhealthy.
Yeah, I'm sure that does cause some problems, but I think it's a wonderful step in the right direction.
Right.
Because kids, I don't know again about your kids, Jason, but mine, they definitely go for the sugariest things they can find in the convenience store or the supermarket. And advertising in Korea, it's not too bad, I'd say, for foods and sweets. But in the UK, it's like 10 times worse. So I can imagine if I was raising them there, it would be an even bigger issue, like a headache for parents.
Yeah, it certainly matters what your peers do as well, because we tried to hold off so long for not allowing our kids to have, candy and sugary treats and stuff. But what we found once again is when they're playing with other kids and those kids are given those sweets, and it's kind of like, what's that?
Yeah. And then it's really difficult to say. It's really awkward to say, no, you can't have that. Like in front of the other parents as well. You're almost saying, oh, your kid, how disgraceful. So that's how my children got into fizzy drinks like soda. Another kid who was younger even than my kids was drinking it. And my son was like, can I have one of those? And his dad was like looking at me and I was like, yeah, of course, I'm cool. And then he's never turned back. Like that's his go-to thing. And I really, really hate that I did that, but it's hard, isn't it? That kind of peer pressure.
I think also from the other side that you were mentioning from the advertisers of the restrictions that they have from an advertising firm. I mean, if you're like a TV station or a radio, internet broadcast, whatever it be, and you have this revenue that's coming in, you could argue, well, if they're not advertising, then somebody else will. But it also comes down to a supply and demand, because when that supply the demand is disappearing and the supply is going up, you have more time that you want to advertise, but other people, just taking out one industry, it's going to make it cheaper for other industries to take over that spot because there's less supply there. So at the very end, I mean, all the different media outlets as well as advertising firms, they probably are going to lose an awful lot of money because of those restrictions.
Yeah, they were the ones speaking up against this and saying there's not yet been any scientific proof that advertising leads to child obesity.
There isn't. However, these companies are spending not millions, billions and billions of dollars a year because they think it might or might not work.
Exactly.
They know it works. Even though there's no, like you mentioned, there's no scientific evidence. But the reason you're spending billions and billions of dollars on those advertising is because you know that it actually does.
Of course, and children are the most easily influenced.
Oh,
right? And maybe after the song break, we can get into a couple of other cases that have been in the headlines of different types of censorship.
Yeah, we'll get back there with Culture Vulture after Rule Painkiller. This is going out to Jin Young Yi. We are back with more Culture Vulture and censorship and do's and don'ts, and who cares if that's a rule? I'm disobeying anyways. What have we got?
We've done the good side, maybe, of censorship. I think many people will be for that, banning fast food advertising and unhealthy foods to kids, showing them those things. This is the opposite side, so ending censorship that has been in place for a long time in another country. And again, I think it's a positive move. I think most people would agree. In Italy recently, they ended a decades-long, in fact, 100 years long censorship of films on moral or religious grounds. Because Italy has, the very strong Roman Catholic traditions there, right?
The Vatican's there.
Yeah, absolutely. So they had this kind of, I guess you could call it a veto vote, right? If they thought, anyone in religion, the higher-ups, that a film was going to bring people's standards, moral standards down, they could ask for a film to be censored or a scene at least from the film to be taken out, right? I mean, probably a lot of people do realize it, but some may not. In Korea, the film censorship is different to in the West. So certain versions of certain movies have slight differences. Certain clips are taken out, right? And unless you compare and contrast or go on the internet, you'd be none the wiser in some cases, right? But for Italy, they're saying that we're living in 2021 and we expect the film industry themselves to now be responsible enough to self-censor. So not put in anything that is going to corrupt the youngsters. And if it is, to make sure it has the right film age ratings attached to it, right? But I thought it was really interesting because some in the industry said taking away the censorship actually has an effect on drawing in viewers, because when a film is censored, people are more intrigued. They're like, what's this? Why is this so shocking? I want to see that grotesque monstrosity. So in that case, they were saying that that's maybe the only negative downside they could see about this.
Yeah, because also they say, no attention is bad attention in terms of media attention that you're gaining. So if your film has been known to be controversial, perhaps for some of the censorship that it received, if that makes its way into the media and people start talking about it, well, all of a sudden you're getting free advertising.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember when I was little and I'd heard things about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like it being way too brutal for screens, being banned and whatnot. And then there was a newer version released, so it's a different film, but it still had the same title. And I was so intrigued as an adult. I was like, I've got to watch that. Like, that had a 20-year delayed effect on my choice of movie at the cinema. Gosh. It was terribly scary still, and I wish I'd never seen it, but it kind of drew me in, right? People want to kind of peek behind the bandages sometimes. They may regret it, though. And the other bit of interesting censorship maybe being removed, it's not been passed yet, is here in Korea. So tattoos.
That's right.
It's a bit of a grey area, isn't it? When you see them sometimes on TV, I remember not so long ago, Jay Park, the famous rapper from 2PM fame as well, his arms were covered in Band-Aids, like these big plasters. And I was like, is he all right? I was asking my wife and she was like, no, it's just the tattoos. He's wearing a short sleeve T-shirt, so they've got to cover them up. And it doesn't feel in-fitting with the rest of modern Korean society, right?
Yeah.
Because tattoos are so prevalent these days.
Yeah. I think it also goes to the meanings that they may have held back in the day, in the past. And I think, the censorship has been covering some of that. But like you mentioned, we're moving to a modern era. It's become an issue and certainly has been in the news as of late, whether or not that will go through or not. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so they're looking at maybe taking away the censorship on screen so you wouldn't have to cover them up, or alternatively, sometimes they're blurred. They might be taking that out. And then one of the lawmakers of the Minor Justice Party, Ryu Hyo-jong, recently came out with some really shocking in a good way photos. She had this low-cut back dress and she had tattoos all over her back. Temporary ones, I might add. But she was protesting for another side of this, where legally speaking, you can only get a tattoo from a medical professional because it's classed as a medical procedure. But she's saying, obviously now the vast majority of tattoo artists are not medical professionals. They're doing their thing, technically illegally, but we should open that law up as well and have this as a more regulated kind of industry.
Yeah, and certainly would be safer for, the entire industry, for people receiving tattoos in the future. And if you're being watched, let's say hypothetically, I don't know if they're being taxed or not, if it's being done illegally, but at the same time, the government can, take a portion of that and perhaps put that towards better usage.
Yeah, and I think the young generation, I don't think there's too many who are against tattoos anymore, right?
Yeah. I don't think no one looks at tattoos and associate it to the negative associations that people might have had a long time ago. It's usually gang affiliated, but all the tattoos these days are very nice. They're not as intense or threatening looking as they used to. And I think one thing that even that lawmaker you actually brought up is that there's so many Korean tattoo artists that are winning in international tattoo conventions and stuff. And she's like, this should be part of our culture that we should be proud of, not censoring it out or making it illegal to practice.
Yeah.
And so I think she actually really brings a very interesting point to that as well.
That's so ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
That technically, it's maybe illegal for them to do that in their home country. They're winning these world titles.
Yeah.
It's maybe the next part of the K-wave. Who knows? And just incidentally, watching the Euros last night, that's a great education. You see so many players with the sleeves, right? The tattoos all on their arms. And when you watch the Korean national team, it's rare that you see anyone. And some of those players are playing in Europe.
There are some that have been in Europe that will have it on. Yeah,
I like
occasionally.
that. Yeah, I think that kind of shows the culture spreading and being more accepting of it as well.
And if you ever watch the NBA, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen any player in the NBA that doesn't have a tattoo. I mean, it's literally probably 99% of athletes in the NBA that are actually tattooed. Anyways, that's going to bring our first hour to a close. We'll be back in a moment after Jordan Sparks. This is Tattoo.